What's cracking, my creeps, and welcome to another virtual trip to the Scholastic Book Fair. My name is Marcello, and today I'm deviating from talking about the only series ever written to talk about another series that you were likely exposed to if you read Animorphs as a kid, and one that has had a much more substantial cultural impact, at least so far. And of course I am talking about Goosebumps. These books are classics, cultural touchstones. They weren't only my clear first introduction to horror literature, as I'm sure that they were for many of you, they were also among the first modern books I read that were written for modern kids. And while reading them now, R.L. Stine's contrived narrative voice is pretty apparent. As a kid, I didn't notice it at all. It felt like they were stories being told to me by one of my friends, and this made them super accessible and easy to get through in a single sitting. Before I even read Animorphs, I was asking my parents to shell out the $4 for Goosebumps books. Were they $4? $4. Not only were the stories good, the covers were amazing. The art was always super unique and exciting, and who could forget the embossed Goosebumps on the title? I think it's fine to judge books by their covers every once in a while, or at least to consider a book's cover when judging it. So today I'd like to talk about my favorite Goosebumps book, the absolute classic, Calling All Creeps. Calling All Creeps is the 50th Goosebumps book, first published in 1996. It's preceded by Vampire Breath, another banger, and followed by Beware the Snowman, which is also pretty good. The cover art by Tim Jacobus shows 4 reptilian monsters, the titular creeps in a telephone booth making a phone call. And the tagline is, just dial 555-CREEP. Here's some R.L. Stine trivia for you. He says in his autobiography that the idea for this book actually came from a prank that backfired on him while he was in college. This book's protagonist is Ricky Beamer, and Ricky is kind of a loser. Something I like a lot about this book is you can really tell what a bum this kid is just from the narration. His thought processes, the way that he approaches situations, the way that he talks about things that happen to him. I get why other kids at school make fun of him. Honestly, I do. He just seems super annoying. This book opens in the middle of the story, but for the sake of the script, I'm just going to recap it in chronological order. So Ricky goes to Harding Middle School, and like I said, he's a bit of a loser, and everyone there loves making fun of him. They call him Ricky the Rat and Sicky Ricky, and he doesn't have any friends of note, at least in the beginning of the book. One day, a new girl arrives at school, and his teacher, Miss Williamson, sits her next to Ricky, asking that he show her around for the day, and Ricky notes that when she's introduced to him, he's busy trying to rapidly scratch out his homework from the night prior before the bell rings. This is what I mean when I say that the book really shows us what a bum Ricky is. It doesn't really attempt to justify why he didn't do his homework. He's not artsy or misunderstood. He has a good home life. He's just a doofus, so the kids at school hate him. So Ricky's kind of excited at the idea of getting to make friends with this girl, whom he describes as kind of cute, and who critically doesn't know that everyone at the school thinks that Ricky is a loser, because in Ricky's mind, that's his problem, that people think he's a loser, not his personality. At lunch, Ricky's telling her stories, she's laughing, and he's really killing it until she asks him if he's on any sports teams, and he says not yet. Very sneaky, Ricky. And then he tells us that whenever guys are choosing teams on the playground, the captains always fight over who has to take him. Now, I'm not saying that being good at sports makes you, like, charming or anything, but let's just consider the possibility that Ricky has earned this treatment. It seems like he doesn't really try at things and then adopts a defeatist attitude when he isn't immediately successful. Anyway, the two enter the lunchroom, and Ricky sees his 4 enemies sitting at a table nearby: Jared, David, Brenda, and Wart. They're 7th graders, and they're always making fun of Ricky or trying to cause him bodily harm. Ricky says he's never done anything to them, and they probably just pick on him because he's easy to pick on, and here's Ricky's sort of social entitlement speaking again. In Ricky's mind, he shouldn't have to do anything to be liked. He is entitled to a thriving social life. The only reason kids don't like him is because other kids don't like him. So Ricky's continuing his comedy routine and charming the pants off of Iris when Wart trips him and he makes a huge mess. It's kind of like that scene in Spider-Man. The whole cafeteria starts chanting "Sicky Ricky" and laughing and cheering, and Ricky looks up and Iris is laughing too. After school, Ricky makes his way to the school paper's office, I guess, the classroom that they do the school paper in. That's the Harding Herald. Ricky lets us know that he's not a reporter at the Herald because he's good at writing or because he likes writing at all, but because he has to get his mandatory 20 elective activity points for school. He signed up for the newspaper because he thought that it would be easy, and at this point I really couldn't blame any of the other newspaper kids if they don't like him. The newspaper's headed up by this girl named Tasha who hates Ricky, and she gives all the good assignments to 8th graders, and she once made Ricky count the dirt patches on the playground and then write a story about why grass didn't grow there, which is hysterical. I would love to have this girl's job, just to be in charge of handing out assignments to kids and then deciding what does and doesn't make the cut. And apparently Ricky tried really hard on this dirt assignment, and he did a really good job, but Tasha never printed it, and so that's why he doesn't like her. But this is silly because it sounds like Ricky got exactly what he wanted easy activity points, and then decided to kick the gift horse in the mouth and overexert himself, and then got resentful about it. Ricky's next assignment was to interview the night janitor about the differences between working days and working nights, which is another pretty funny one, but also one that could have yielded a fun friendship with the janitor or maybe some interesting stories, so really not that bad, but I'm sure Ricky made it miserable for both of them. In any case, Ricky's stuck asking Tasha for assignments 3 times a week and is beholden to write whatever nonsense she comes up with. Miss Richards, the teacher who runs the paper, also apparently doesn't like Ricky very much. I can't imagine why. And David and Wart, 2 of his enemies, are sports reporters for the paper, so really smart idea for Ricky to choose this as his elective. So Ricky confronts the 2 of them during his visit to the newspaper office or whatever, and they bully him some more, and long story short, Ricky winds up spilling soda all over Tasha's keyboard. This is pre-Google, so there's not a constant autosave going on in the background, no cloud, and all the work that she's been doing on this story has just been erased, and she's faced with a blue screen of death. So Tasha blows up on Ricky, calling him all the things that all the kids call him, and then she kicks him off the newspaper, which really upsets Ricky because it means that he's not going to get his activity points, and then he may have to go to summer school. So Tasha keeps berating him, and when Sicky Ricky the rat turns around to leave, guess who's been watching the whole time? Iris. They walk down the hall together, and Iris kind of sympathizes with Ricky, which is nice because I think Ricky really needs a friend, even if he is a doofus. She asks Ricky if he skates and tells him that she loves to skate and always removes her brakes because it's more fun that way. And Iris, dear, I think that Ricky is not going to be a good match. There are greener pastures. He's just the first boy you've met in the school. I find it really funny that as an adult reading this book, I am totally just siding with the faceless sort of rest of the school instead of the protagonist. This was not my experience reading this book as a kid, by the way. So anyway, the 2 keep walking, and Ricky's getting the feeling that they're being followed when out jump his 4 enemies. They spin him around and mess with him a bit, and ultimately they make him sing a song, which is their favorite thing to do, and again, hilarious. They make him sing the Star-Spangled Banner, and I'm going to invalidate any shot that I have at holding office right now and say the Star-Spangled Banner is a trash song, so extra funny points. Ricky runs off after this, leaving Iris to face the potential predations of the bullies alone, although this is never mentioned. The next Saturday, Ricky wakes up to a phone call, and it's Tasha, and she wants him to take her dad's Pentax camera down to the school to take pictures of the school car wash for the paper. Fun fact, I actually own a Pentax camera. It was my first grown-up camera. It does not work anymore, but it gave me years of faithful service, and there's some Marcello trivia for you. Anyway, Ricky does not even know that there's a car wash because he doesn't pay attention to anything that's happening at the school, and he doesn't participate in things, but he goes anyway because he really doesn't want to be kicked off the school newspaper. He doesn't want to go to summer school. At the car wash, Ricky sees that Wart's parents are having their car washed, and he has to take a picture, but is assaulted by 4 hooligans with water hoses, and guess who it is? It's his 4 enemies. Looking down at the soaked camera, Ricky loses it. He snaps. He grabs one of the hoses from one of the kids, and he just soaks Wart's parents' car. He then tries to run away again, and he slips, and he falls onto the camera, further breaking it. Back in the newspaper office, Tasha tells Ricky that her dad is going to sue him. She tells him that he doesn't take anything seriously, that he thinks everything is a goof, and Ricky insists that this is not the case, but again, why should we blame Tasha for feeling this way? She obviously cares a lot about the paper, and Ricky basically just showed up for the activity points and then complained about the stories he had to write, and he's admittedly not even a good writer, and now he's broken her father's camera. I'm shocked, honestly, that she even let him borrow it in the first place. Anyway, she goes off on him, just like she did the day before, but not only does she call him a rat this time, she really goes into the insult. She breaks it down. She says that Ricky's a rat because he is garbage. He has a rodent-like personality. It is who he is that makes him a rat, and Ricky really doesn't like this, and it incenses him. And this is when Ricky hatches his master plan. He will sneak into the school after the newspaper's finalized, but before it's printed, and he'll add a quick personal ad to the front page. Calling all creeps, calling all creeps. If you're a real creep, call Tasha at 555-6709 after midnight. That night, Ricky executes his plan, and he's almost caught, but he pulls it off. He arrives home and immediately calls Iris to revel in his victory, and to his disappointment, she's more trepidatious than excited or congratulatory. She tells him she's got a bad feeling about this. The next morning, Ricky sees Tasha, and she ignores him, and he doesn't really care and is more focused on enjoying the fruits of his labor. The kids at school are all teasing him about the car wash incident, and Wart and his other enemies squirt him with water at the water fountain, but none of that really matters because Ricky knows that the school paper will be handed out that afternoon, and that he will have the last laugh. After school, Ricky has dinner with his cousins who live across town, and he doesn't get home until like 9:30, and he decides to do his homework tonight, so he has 2 hours worth of homework because I guess he's never done it before and he's got a backlog, and he finishes just before midnight, and then the phone rings. and it is Iris, and she's a little bit frantic sounding, and she greets him with an urgent whisper, and she says that he's in trouble and has he read the school paper. Ricky lets her know that he hasn't, because when they were handing out the papers, he was called to the library where they wanted to talk to him about a bunch of books he lost, and this is another situation where Ricky is fully to blame. He just lost a bunch of books for the library and never brought them back, and they had to chase him down for them. Anyway, Iris's dad rushes her off the phone before she's able to tell Ricky what kind of trouble he's in, and she hangs up, and Ricky's frustrated that he wasn't able to find out what's going on, and then his phone rings again, and thinking it's Iris, he picks up really quickly, but it's this strange voice, and the voice whispers,
"I saw your message in the school newspaper. I'm calling as you instructed. I am a creep."
We're doing voices for this one. So Ricky slams the phone down, but it rings again, and this time it's a different voice, but it says more or less the same thing. He's a creep, he's calling because he saw Ricky's orders. Ricky hangs up again, and then his dad yells at him about receiving calls late at night, but the creeps just call all night long. So Ricky doesn't get to sleep until 7 a.m., and the next day he's practically falling asleep in his cereal, but his parents have no sympathy for him because the calls kept them up all night too. Ricky's mom threatens to go lecture the kids in his class, which puts the fear of God into Ricky as he imagines what this would do to his already abysmal social life. At school, Ricky meets up with Iris, who hands him a copy of the school paper, and Ricky scans the front page and he sees that the message he typed has been changed. It now reads, calling all creeps. If you're a real creep, call Ricky after midnight with his phone number. Ricky storms off to find Tasha, confronting her in front of an entire class of 8th graders, and she asks if he got any calls last night, and he's like abashedly like, a few, clearly letting them know that he was very bothered and inconvenienced by all the calls that he got. And then all the kids in the class laugh at him. And the teacher laughs at him as well. And I just can't help but think again that Ricky's just such a herb. Why would he go and confront Tasha? Why would he do it in front of all of the 8th graders? And then when she poked at him, when she let him know that she was the one who flipped this prank on him, why would he admit that he got calls all night long and it bothered him? He's just asking to be everyone's punching bag at this point, honestly. Ricky's motivations are a mystery to us all, but one thing is for sure, and that is that he is a rat. So all morning, Ricky's thinking about these weird calls, and at lunch he has to walk past the table of 7th grade enemies again, but for some reason they ignore him this time, and he sits down to eat, and he notices how conspicuously few kids are messing with him. It's almost a relief when he gets hit in the face with a wadded up piece of paper, but he opens it up to find out that it's actually a note that reads, "When will the creeps meet?" Ricky looks around the room to see who could have thrown it, and he doesn't see anyone other than his 4 enemies, and he tells Iris about the note, and she reiterates that she had a bad feeling about this from jump. Iris suggests that Ricky take the phone off the hook before going to bed, and he's enthralled with how smart she is. I'm personally more surprised that Ricky's parents didn't think of that, but I guess the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. It does make me laugh to think of them just laying up all night, letting the phone just ring and ring and ring and ring and keep them all up without considering unplugging the phone or removing it from the hook. That is just funny. Iris then asks Ricky if he wants to help her bake some stuff for the school bake sale that's happening the following Saturday. She needs help buying supplies, and Ricky has literally never hung out with anyone socially before, so he loses his mind with excitement. His elation continues until he reaches his locker, where he sees that someone has painted "When will the creeps meet?" on his door in red paint. That night, the phone calls start even earlier, around 8:30, and they are all asking the same thing. The next day after school, Ricky is super jazzed to be meeting Iris, describing himself as a little pumped up. He can't wait to work with her and imagines that it'll be better than the time that Brittany Hopper found out that she was going to be his lab partner for frog dissection, and she was so unhappy that she stayed home for 2 weeks and Ricky had to cut the frog up all by himself and he made a disgusting mess. Did you guys have a kid like Ricky in your class when you were younger? Slap like if you wanted to slap a kid like Ricky. So anyway, Ricky's looking for Iris outside the school when his 4 7th grade enemies jump out and drag him into the woods, and they pull him into a clump of shrubs where no one can see them, and then Wart speaks. "We wouldn't harm you, Commander," he says. "We are the creeps." Ricky thinks that they're joking as they all apologize for the mistreatment they've dealt him, calling him Commander the whole time. Brenda tells him, "You no longer have to pretend. Now that we know you're the Commander, we must all act quickly." I'm not doing voices because they're in their human form. They tell him that they don't understand why he's been delaying, and they have so little time to complete their mission. The identity seeds will go stale in 1 week. "We have little time to plant them," David says. "So little time to turn everyone in the school into creeps." And Ricky listens with growing incredulity as his 4 enemies continue, telling him that they must plant the identity seeds or their mission will fail, and if their mission fails, then... He actually does that. It's in the book. And with that, Brenda reaches into her bag and she produces the identity seeds, and Ricky says they look like chocolate chips in a Ziploc bag. "As you know, Commander, each student must eat one seed," Wart says. "It only takes one seed to turn a human into a creep." And then they all start shouting things like, "Creeps will rule! Humans are the past! Creeps are the future!" And as they chant, they start to transform. Ricky stares in horror as their skin darkens and turns purple. Long tongues appear between jagged teeth, and their hair shrinks into their skulls. And before long, Ricky is staring in horror at 4 lizard monsters. Wart then eats a squirrel. The whole conversation has now taken on a completely different light, and Ricky decides that it's time to go, but the creeps stop him, and they demand that he think of a plan, and they're slapping high fives with their tongue periodically, which is such great imagery for these guys. Like, all 4 of them are at once slapping all 4 of their tongues together, like, after one of them makes a point, like, for emphasis. It's very funny. It is at this point that Ricky realizes that this may not be a joke, and he decides that the safest thing to do is just play along. He tells the creeps that the best course of action is to schedule a meeting to talk about the plan. Ricky has a future at a tech startup. Wart's like, "I have a plan now, Ricky," and Ricky, not missing a beat, is like, "Okay, great. Let's schedule a meeting to talk about the plan. Soon." Honestly, I take back everything I said about Ricky. He's going places. Wart insists that Ricky has to hear his plan now, so Ricky agrees. And Wart's plan is to sneak into the school in the morning and plant the identity seeds in the school lunch. That way each student will eat at least one seed, something that the creeps repeatedly remind Ricky and each other is necessary for them all to turn into creeps. Once they eat the seed, by nighttime they will no longer be human. They will be creeps. Wart wants Ricky's approval for his plan, and Ricky says it sounds fine, but he'll talk to them tomorrow and tell them his final decision. Never one to allow good time to be wasted, Wart is insistent that they could do the plan tomorrow. By tomorrow night, everyone can be creeps, and Ricky puts his hand up like he's some kind of creep gangster, and he just says, "Tomorrow." And then he walks away. And the creeps let him go, and as Ricky gets further away, he finds himself moving faster to put more distance between him and the creeps. But he knows that his troubles don't end once he's free of this encounter, and he resolves to stop the creeps. That night at dinner, Ricky tries to tell his parents about the creeps, and they think he's joking and just blatantly refuse to accept that he's being serious, something that I'm sure must only happen in kids fiction. Ricky picks up the phone and calls Iris, but she doesn't pick up, so he decides to go to school early the next day to talk to the principal, Miss Crawford. Surely she will believe him. Ricky is an idiot. Everyone at the school, including the staff, openly reviles him. He is sicky Ricky. Big surprise, the talk with Miss Crawford doesn't go well. Mrs. Crawford kind of cuts Ricky off to ask him about the car wash incident, which ruins the little script he's probably been rehearsing in his big dumb mind the whole way over, and he proceeds to totally botch the whole thing. He says, "I want to talk to you about Wart. He's not a kid. He's a creep." Like, creep is this universal term, like Mrs. Crawford's gonna have any idea what he's talking about. I know they call themselves the creeps, but creep is a pretty generic term, and Ricky elaborates, but with that as his opening, he's kind of destined for failure, and nothing else he says does him any favors either. Mrs. Crawford insists that Ricky visit the school nurse, but Ricky runs away. Right into his 4 enemies, the creeps. They've decided to put the seeds in the cafeteria after all, so I guess they don't respect their commander all that much. They go to the lunchroom where Brenda gives Ricky the seeds and tells him that he can have the honor of sneaking into the kitchen to plant them. I kind of like entertaining the idea that throughout this book, the creeps know Ricky's full of shit, and they just recruit him to fuck with him and coerce him into helping them with their plan. They're totally fine with him never transforming. Ricky's not a good actor, he's not a good improviser, he's not very smart, so I can't imagine he's super convincing. Anyway, Ricky sneaks into the kitchen, he raises the seed bag above a huge pot of macaroni, and then he pretends to slip and fall and drop the seeds to the ground where they scatter in every direction. Triumphant, Ricky returns to the creeps where Jared slaps another bag of seeds in his hands, spins him around, and sends him right back into the cafeteria. And this time Ricky puts them in the macaroni and he stirs them around before being caught by Mrs. Marshall, one of the cooks. You gotta appreciate the endless reservoir of generic names R.L. Stine is able to conjure up for these books, by the way. So Ricky tries to whisper to Mrs. Marshall not to serve the macaroni, and she misunderstands him, thinking that he's being critical of the quality of the food, and she chastises him and threatens to make him eat some of the identity seed-laced macaroni, and Ricky does his signature move and runs away. Outside, the creeps slap him on the back. They are ecstatic, and they can't wait for school to be crawling with creeps. Ricky hides in the stairwell at lunch, thinking about all the kids turning into purple lizard monsters, and he waits for signs all day, but none appear. His classmates seem to be perfectly fine. After school, the creeps ambush him again, and they lead him back to their hiding place in the woods. They're wondering why the plan didn't work, and Ricky, without thinking, lets them know that it's because no one eats the macaroni. It's a school rule, it's been that way for years. This makes Wart suspicious, and he asks how Ricky would know that, as he only arrived at the school a few days before them. I wonder what happened to the real commander. Brenda interrupts his interrogation to tell him that she has a better plan. They'll bake the seeds into cookies and then give them away for free at the bake sale, because Brenda has stumbled upon the fundamental truth that it is physically physically impossible for humans to turn down free cookies. They all turn to Ricky for approval for some reason, and he tries to say that he doesn't like Brenda's plan, and he suggests that they bury the seeds in the ground to see if they sprout. That way they'll have lots of seeds. This is Ricky's earnest attempt to remove himself from the situation using cunning. The creeps now all question his identity and are demanding that he transform because he said something so stupid that he can't possibly be a creep. And at this point, Iris storms into the circle and she's all business. She tells them that she's the commander's right-hand creep and they don't have time for all this transforming. They've got to bake these cookies. This assuages the creeps, who fall in line behind Iris as she leads them to her house to do some baking. On the way, Ricky asks if she's really one of them and she says that she is, and his stomach sinks because he's just so dumb. Fortunately, one page later, Iris reveals that she is not a creep and she was only trying to keep up appearances. Turns out she followed them into the woods, overheard their conversation, wound up watching the creeps transform. So Iris and Ricky decide that they're going to have to bake the cookies, but once they're at the bake sale, they're going to need to find a way to prevent the kids from eating them. On Saturday, they bring the cookies to the gym and every kid in the school is there, running around carrying baked goods and getting excited. The creeps baked hundreds of cookies, more than enough for each kid in the school to have one, the necessary number to turn each kid into a creep, as we know. Ricky notices that everything costs $1, nothing is free other than their cookies, and as they go to set up, Wart and Brenda are like, screw this table, let's just start handing the cookies out immediately. Ricky knows that he has to do something, so he steals a nearby microphone and he starts yelling into it that everyone needs to not eat the cookies. Don't eat the cookies, he yells. You'll all become monsters. Bumps will grow on your face. You'll turn into purple lizard creatures and you'll eat squirrels. Stay away from the free cookies. Now I'd like you to take a step back with me and imagine that you're just a kid in this school. Ricky's this kind of loner who has no friends. Not a sin in and of itself, but he also has this kind of shitty attitude. Like, he acts like everyone owes him something. He acts like he's entitled to people's respect and admiration. He's constantly victimizing and self-pitying. He refuses to actually try things. You know that he joined the school paper where he never actually wrote a story, but he did trash Tasha's father's camera and also had a complete meltdown and attacked Wart's parents in their car with a water hose. And now he's here at the bake sale making a spectacle of himself again, and also still apparently targeting Wart, who is next to him, having made these allegedly poisonous cookies. So everyone at the school does exactly what you would imagine that they would do. They start laughing at him and making fun of him. They're calling him all the classic names, and Tasha and the teachers run to grab the microphone from Ricky, and Tasha starts up a Sicky Ricky chant. This grows louder and louder, and Ricky wonders how he's gonna save them if they won't even listen to him. And as the chanting and laughter bombard him from all sides, Ricky has a final, desperate idea. He will eat the seeds himself. Ricky, the selfless saint, even after everything the school's done for him, will eat the seeds to save them from turning into creeps. He leaps wildly towards the cookies, ready to devour them in a feat of martyrdom, when he's struck in the face with a piece of chocolate pie. And as he sits in disbelief, more kids start throwing food at Ricky, and their chanting is disjointed now. It's a cacophony of insults coming from all sides. Sicky Ricky, Ricky the rat. Ricky fights through the wall of food and the onslaught of verbal abuse to get to the cookies, and as he reaches for them, Wart and Brenda ask what he's waiting for. Ignore the chanting, Brenda says. Once they eat the cookies, they'll all be creeps. You'll be their leader, and they will all be your slaves. Fun fact, this was actually changed to they will all follow you in later editions of this book. It takes just a few seconds, but the implication of what Brenda has said slowly makes its way through Ricky's dull mind. They will all be your slaves, Brenda repeats over the shouts, and Ricky finally has the first good idea of his entire sad life. He throws Tasha a cookie, starts handing them out to the rest of the school, gives some to everyone, and makes sure to take one for himself as he hands them out. And that's the end of the book. Ricky the Pariah achieves redemption by sheer dumb luck and by finally having a good idea at the perfect moment. I personally think that it would have been pretty funny if Ricky had forgotten to take a cookie for himself, but that wouldn't have been keeping with the Goosebumps tradition. R.L. Stine has said that all the Goosebumps books have happy endings, and this certainly is one. Something I love about Goosebumps is that while they definitely do all have happy endings, they're usually not the happy ending that you would expect. Often the protagonist winds up embracing the thing that they've been fearing throughout the book, or finds out that they've been the scary thing all along. This makes for some fun twists that often cast the book in a different light after the fact, but are never so much that they weigh the plot down. The books are lighthearted horror, and they have lighthearted tongue-in-cheek endings that often take you by surprise. By the time I'd read this particular Goosebumps book, I was well into Animorphs, so my first thought upon finding out about the seeds was that I would have loved to steal one and get to transform into a giant lizard at will. Ricky ultimately chooses to become a creep because it means that the whole school will be his his slaves, but I would have been on board long before then. I do wonder what happened to the original commander though. Hopefully his ship crashed into the sun or something and is never found, because that could pose some awkward problems for Ricky later on. On reflection, there are probably a ton of things that could blow Ricky's cover after the fact. We really don't know much about the creeps at all, where they come from, how big their society is, how widespread of an invasion this is. But you know what? If they were dumb enough to believe Ricky was their commander because of a prank, then there's a good chance they'll never figure Ricky out. May he rule the school forever. So that's it. If you have watched this video all the way to the end, thank you so much. You may not know this, but I only have like 200 subs. So if you have watched it this far, you're in a very small group of people. So the amount of thanks that I'm giving split up into each one of you, it's quite a bit of gratitude. Feel free to leave a comment below if you like Goosebumps, or if you have other series that you like that you want to know if I read. I was such a little reading junkie as a kid. So yeah, please comment. Let's talk about books. Bye.